FNaF World is one of, if not the most underrated of the original FNaF games, especially in regards to its lore. Often because Scott regretted tying the RPG to the main lore of the games, but many don't realize this lore is still quite relevant and does help us understand what Scott intended with FNaF 4. Oh wait, I'm stupid. Welcome back everyone. If you're unaware, I recently released my first video ever, covering my theory on FNaF 4 and its minigames, answering how with those first couple games, we can solve and understand the story of, well, 1 to 4. Regarding that video too, I am greatly surprised and happy the reception has gotten. Thank you so much to everyone who left a comment, liked, or just watched the video. It was so greatly inspiring seeing people who inspired me to learn basic editing leave a positive comment. Thank all of you so much again. Moving on past that, consider this video as somewhat as a sequel to that one, as it will follow up on a lot of what we discussed there, so I suggest watching it first. However, whether you did or not, FNaF World is very useful in uncovering answers Scott wanted us to figure out after FNaF 4, but what are all those answers in particular? Well, let's not waste our time too much and get right into it. Before we start, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Moving on, let's actually first consider the context of FNaF World's release after FNaF 4. What were some of the biggest questions we had coming off the game? Well, while questions surrounding the sister, the gameplay being real or not, and more existed, none compared to the questions of who the Fredbear plush was alongside the crying child's identity. These arguably were the biggest and most important debates following FNaF 4, and likely what Scott would be trying to answer through FNaF World's lore. But what was FNaF World's lore? After all, the game is a silly RPG with meta references to fans and even Scott Cawthon himself. You even fight his avatar Anim Dude. Luckily for us though, the lore in this game is quite condensed and honestly straightforward, as almost all of it is contained to the clock path and ending. The only real lore relevant part outside of the clocks is the intro segment, which, conveniently, is a perfect place to start. Start the game being met by a set of pale yellow eyes. They stare at us, giving us several lines of dialogue.
Everything that happens out there has an effect here, understand? This is a safe place, a sanctuary. But something has gone wrong, and now it can be seen here. Something went very wrong, and now I am here. But I won't let the same happen to you. I will put you back together.
Now these lines actually give us a lot to start off with. Firstly, we know who's talking and who he's speaking to. For one, it repeats the same final line the plushware ended FNaF 4 with, which not only makes the speaker the same as the one in FNaF 4, but makes the one he's speaking to the crying child. If you also watched the previous theory, this would then mean the eyes here would be the puppet, but we'll move on to that later towards the end. What of the rest of the text though? They speak of this place being a sanctuary, a place that was safe, but something has gone wrong elsewhere and it now affects this sanctuary. The out there is most likely the real world and is affecting this spiritual sanctuary place, but what did he mean though by not letting the same happen to the crying child? Well, like the puppet, that is something we'll go back into later towards the end. With nothing pushed aside for now, we can slide into the main game itself. In the main game, you're often being directed by Adventure Fredbear, who gives directions where to go, guides you, etc. Basically a tutorial man. However, if you wait long enough on his final piece of dialogues, you get a conversation with a weird glitched out 8-bit Fredbear, or as I call him, Glitch Bear. This Glitch Bear will often direct you to find the clocks through cryptic language. Clocks are very important and we will go into them very imminently, but there are two pieces of dialogue we should take into account before we get into the clocks. Those dialogues being,
But you don't really believe that, do you? There's a task for you to complete. You need to leave breadcrumbs for him to help him find his way. Yes, the world beneath the surface world. This is a safe place, a sanctuary. The truth is that there is no safe place. You don't understand that. You're made for one thing. There is a task for you to complete. Before you take this passage, go back. Find the clock.
These two pieces of dialogue give us some very useful indicators, with the first line saying that we have a task, that being, well, the clocks, but more importantly, that we're leaving breadcrumbs for a him. Who this is told to us later, but it's worth noting that these breadcrumbs are a reference to the clocks, which as we'll get into, are pretty important on the meaning here. However, with the second line, it restates the fact that this was a safe place that is, well, no longer safe, but then says that we're made for one thing, with a specific task in mind. This tells us that the player of FNaF World is effectively an artificial creation of this Glitch Bear entity, and luckily, this makes our adventure character pretty much inconsequential for the story. He's just a vector for the Glitch Bear to accomplish his goal. With that said though, we can start getting to the clocks outright. Throughout the game, we can find these clocks throughout the map, which then spawns us in a unique minigame each time. Each one is very simple in and of themselves. In the first one, you push a BB into a box, and then wait for the timer to tick down. In the second clock, you complete it by lining up 4 buttons by touching them. On the third, you push all 4 cupcakes into the boxes. And on the fourth one, you complete this by touching the center button before the timer runs out, then giving you the code 395248. The final clock then follows. You are met with a Shadow Bonnie sprite, having to push him into a box. Wow, there's a lot of boxes here. After completing Put Something in a Box Simulator, you can then play the game normally until you defeat Pork Patch and gain the key. Then by returning the Chop Rewards and unlocking a key block, it reveals a warp portal. By then entering the warp portal, it gives you the clock ending.
We are still your friends. Do you believe that? The pieces are in place for you. All you have to do is find them. Rest.
Okay. There wasn't a whole lot on the surface, but if you remember anything, these lines pretty much spell out the entire meaning here. It not only reaffirms the speaker here is the exact same one as the final speaker of FNaF 4, reiterating the "We are still your friends" line, but also confirms that he is speaking to the crying child at the same time. However, what's more important is the lines about the pieces and finding them. These pieces indicate that the Glitchbear here wants the crying child to find pieces, and by finding these pieces, he indicates that he'll be able to rest. Which does make sense, given the trophy for this ending is a crying child trophy, indicating that he rested. But what are the pieces? Well, firstly, they're the same as the breadcrumbs, as both involve the crying child finding them or finding his way with, so they're for him to find. These pieces are also the clocks. But what are the clocks? Well, as many have pointed out across the many years since the game came out, each of the clocks minigames corresponds to a build-up minigame for Happiest Day in FNaF 3. The ones required to unite the kids to the main Happiest Day minigame, but more particularly, they are the hints in Follow Me. Clock 1 corresponds to BB's Air Adventure, where you click a picture of BB on the wall and can find the text BB double-click in Follow Me. Here you can also see the second clock minigame corresponds to the hint for the button controls for Mango's Quest. Each one follows this same pattern. 4 gray cupcakes for Chica's Party World, the 4th clock giving us the wall tower code hint for Stage 01, and the final one matching the Shadow Bonnie hint in Follow Me, which then leads you to the glitch minigame. Each of these minigames are about setting up the Happiest Day minigames, but not the main one itself, only the ones required to achieve it. This allows us to better spell out what exactly is going on here in the clocks. Pieces and breadcrumbs are the Happiest Day minigames you're setting up, and you're doing this for the crying child to find, and for him to be able to rest. If you remember from the previous theory too, these Happiest Day minigames are the crying child's memories. This tells us the player for all the minigames of FNaF 3 is the crying child, except for the last Happiest Day minigame of course. This would just be the crying child finding his memories and freeing his friends, and by doing so, he's able to rest. The culmination of this would be the Happiest Day minigame itself, as mentioned. This is effectively saying that the crying child is the receiver of Happiest Day after he had freed his friends, the MCI kids. This concept is even boosted with an update to a FNaF World, as well as a teaser with source code, and within that source code you can find the words, "He put the pieces back together," which honestly quite adds up if it's about him piecing his memories together and freeing his friends in the process, and by extension, freeing himself. This also wouldn't be the first time we've seen a similar theme before in the series. In the novel trilogy, particularly the 4th Closet, we see more of the ghost children, the most important of which being Michael Brooks, the Golden Freddy spirit of the trilogy. In the book, he's trying to free his friends, even calling them broken, and using a very similar put back together line. He is struggling to free his friends though, but Carlton, an old friend of Brooks, guides and helps him piece his friends back together, which then frees them, allowing him to then defeat Afton, freeing all of them alongside Brooks. If this theory is correct, it'd be nearly the exact same theme, with Charlie taking Carlton's place and helping Golden Freddy, in this case the crying child, piece his memories back together and free his friends, which then allows them all to be freed together, fulfilling Charlotte's goal and freeing all the children, and fulfilling her promise she made to the crying child, putting them back together. With all those details in mind, consider again the context of when FNaF World came out in relation to FNaF 4. The plush bear and the crying child's identity were arguably again the biggest debates following 4. Things Scott would be trying to answer through World's relevant lore. Just think about it. If these were the biggest divisions after FNaF 4, the main debates, things that everyone were discussing about, why would Scott, when making a game which is clearly tied to the previous game, not answer at least some of those major questions. So taking in that logic, this would mean this is giving us the answers to those questions, clarifying Happiest Day for the crying child, which then means the crying child is Golden Freddy, while Glitchbear is overseeing the setting up of Happiest Day for Golden Freddy, which in FNaF 3 is what the puppet does, making the Glitchbear the puppet and by extension, Plushbear. Again, to hammer this point home, if Crying Child and the Plushbear's identity were the largest discussions at their 4, why would a path so clearly tied to both characters not be answering the biggest question about them, who they are? With all that out of the way, I believe that answers the main questions about FNaF World. It influences on the identity and fates of the main characters from 4, while clarifying what Happiest Day exactly is. Though there is one thing we did leave open earlier, that being what the puppet meant during the intro. Let's replay those lines.
Something went really wrong, and now I am here. But I don't want the same happen to you.
Now before we go into this may seem like at first like a stretch, but I want you to bear with me, as it will make sense. We must first ask, what specifically occurred? Well, it could just be the bite, but what caused down the question for me is the following line, for not wanting the same to happen to the crying child. There's not many options for what this could mean, but one does open up when we realize that FNaF World is quite symbolic. It's not an event happening at one point in time, it represents a passage of time, from the earliest points in the timeline to the end, Happiest Day. With that in mind, it means these lines don't have to be about the bite, but actually predate the bite. What if it's about the MCI? Firstly, it does make sense. The puppet is now here because of the MCI. We see this in Give Gifts Give Life. The puppet arrives to give life to the children because of the murders. Her calling is to protect the children. The missing children's incident in this case will be what went very wrong on the outside, that caused the puppet to come here and make things right. This then gives us an explanation for the second line. If this is in reference to the MCI, this would be the puppet trying to save the crying child from the same fate as the others, the only one she can truly save. She won't let him become an animatronic if she can help it. She won't let the same happen to him. But we do kinda all know how that turns out in the end, don't we? Conveniently for me, this allows me to give a quick leeway into answering one of the major objections to the last video, that being this one by the Unwinded Truth, who was concerned on why the puppet would only revive the crying child but not the other children. And the answer to this is somewhat nuanced. One important thing to realize is that while spirits can heal and revive people, keeping them alive from their own will, it's not unlimited. In the 4th closet, Michael gives a part of himself, that being his soul, to heal Carlton of the molten liquid injected into him. Carlton, though, even warns against Michael doing this, as is well a part of his soul. It's reasonable then, he can't be doing this willy-nilly, as it's probably a big act to do this at all. Again, it's his soul. Similarly, with Angel keeping Afton alive in the Frights books, while it's not stated, I doubt he can attach himself to many people and do the same all at once. He was barely keeping Afton alive as it is, and Jessica and Frailty was outright limited by the amount of remnants she had through the pendant. If the puppet is anything like these examples, she wouldn't be able to save all the children, so she would have to save the one she cares about the most, the crying child. Whew. Well guys, that was it. This was a much shorter video compared to the last one, thankfully might I add. This was also sort of a sequel to that video, so I hope you enjoyed it, and grant more insight from the conclusions of the previous one. If you have any thoughts on the theory, please leave them down below in the comments, and like the video if you enjoyed it. I greatly value and appreciate any sort of feedback. It's also been really fun making these past 2 projects. I do hope to create more in the near future, and as I do have an idea as well about a FNaF World gameplay video, so keep in watch for that. With that being said though, have a great day.